What is this? Announcements. There we go. Module 5, lecture material. Groups and teams. Here we go. If it's working. Oh, where'd everybody go? This is the right class, right? Yes, yes, yes. 21 spring, yes. Okay. Cool. Well, I see a few of you out there. Make some noise. Let me know if you can hear me. We got a little bit of a different setup today, so make sure that it's working. Help me out. Because I see some people dropping out of there. You are in the right place. If this is Management 520, managing. Awesome. So not too much echo there. Thanks for chiming in, Skylar. Appreciate that. We are on vacation here. Awesome. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. So, and I will be back in the classroom on Wednesday, next session of the game. And we were going to do like maybe the city council meeting this today, but I just don't think that this is a good time to do that. So we will do a short lecture here, about half an hour today, and then we will pick up immediately on Wednesday with city council meeting. So if you are on city council, I need to feel free to email me, but I'll run you guys through the meeting almost as soon as we hop online on Wednesday in class. Today is going to be a little bit different. Like I said, we're only going to do this for about half an hour here. And unlike before where we would do trivia, since I'm on my wife's laptop, since I'm out of town this weekend, I don't have my full rig where I can see everything at the same time. So that's why you can see the screen here on the YouTube feed. Don't worry, I will make this private video here as soon as we get on. Oh, is it giving you double audio? Oh, I'm sorry. That's terrible. So how about that? Is that better? Either that or the double audio is just a function of the room that I am in right now. So how do I... Wait a minute. There we go. There's the problem. So hopefully did it get better? So let me know. Let me know there, Cole, or everybody... Or maybe it's just Cole. I don't know. All good. Awesome. All right. So Anyway, I'll stay off the YouTube page. So we're not going to do trivia today, but this is what I want you to do. I will give everybody who is on the live stream today a free, what are they, the mastery exercise in this class. So if you're on the live stream here today, all right, post in the comments. And just say hi, just say I'm here, tell me a joke or whatever, make fun of my, my audio. I don't care. As long as you're in there and I can see you, then I have something to verify with. But I will make the video private after we're done with it, so you can still navigate it through Blackboard, because I've got the link posted there. But if you're normally not comfortable with posting things like that, it's totally fine. Nobody will be able to see it outside of the class. All right? And so post in there, and I will give you, absolutely positively, I will give you a free one for today, so you don't have to fight over it in trivia. All right? So if you're here, this is the one day where you get, I guess, participation points for just being here. And I'm totally good with that. So, but we will do a shortened lecture today, and then on Wednesday we will pick it back up immediately with our exercise. The reason why I'm doing this lecture is, first of all, we got jacked last Monday, and second of all is that this is probably one of the most important sections of the book, and there's a reason why I kick off the game usually at right about this point in time, because you can start to see how the lectures are going to line up with what it is that you're actually experiencing. Okay, and so that's why I made it a point to make sure that we're doing this one today. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong. Yeah, make sure that we're doing today, because time. So all 9 weeks has been about individuals, individual differences, individual incompatibilities, good desire, emotion, motivation theory, all that cool stuff. Time. So chapter 9 and chapter 10, where we glue everything together and we start talking about teams. And so this is probably the most useful chapter in the entire book. Situation where you're having difficulty getting people to do what it is that you want them to do. Or if you're a new manager and you're in a new situation where you haven't done this before and you're now in charge of other people, this is absolutely positively a book to actually refer to. And remember, this book is persistent state. So if you find yourself a couple years down the road and you're like, man, I don't know what my guys are doing, get back into this chapter, come back and check some of the stuff that we're going to talk about. Check out some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, because it is really vital to your success. To kind of understand, there's three things in particular, just three things I really want you to pull out through the chapters on your own. And the next one, which is chapter 10, which is all about conflict and negotiation, I'm not going to cover that one. That one's for you to go check out, okay? Because this entire exercise that we're doing is all about conflict and negotiation. You're going to get better at it as you go. But if you want to get better at it right now, go read that chapter and watch the video that I posted up there in Blackboard on negotiation in particular. But better at it instantaneously. It's 3 minutes. It's totally worth your time. I'm not going to make you do it. It's up to you. The thing that I do want to cover is this chapter, really important, okay? And that's managing groups and teams. The first thing I want you to pull from this. First thing, very straightforward, is there is absolutely a difference between a group and a team, okay? Now, a lot of places where you're going to work, they're going to call you a team, but you're not. And likewise, there's going to be other instances where you're better off recognizing that you're in a group, and you might actually perform a little bit better in that situation where you don't have to depend upon other people. And so there's a difference between those two things. Number two thing is that all teams and all groups have what we call properties, okay? And so these are consistent across the board, regardless of where you are, in what situation, what you're managing, where you're working, what industry you're in, if it's nonprofit, it's military, whatever. Okay, you're going to notice that there are certain properties that are consistent across different groups and teams. And so it's important to point those out so that when you're managing, you can kind of think along those different delineations, those different lines. And then the last thing is that every team and group goes through the team process. There are very few things in organizational behavior where the lit all lines up and everybody kind of agrees on something. This is one of the rare ones, and so it's really important to kind of pay attention to this. And I'm going to use the example that we were doing last week in class to illustrate my points on this one. So here we go. Let's talk about this chapter in a little bit greater detail. If you do have any questions for me today or comments or anything like that, punch them in there. I will check them at the end of the video, and we'll spend or at the end of the lecture session today, and we'll spend a couple minutes chit-chatting about that. It's just not the best setup for that today. So today's more of a slideshow. We're on rails here, and so let's get this coaster going. So chapter 9, groups and teams. Here we go. Let's talk about group dynamics. First thing that you want to think about is like, there's different ways to actually think about different groups. So there's formal groups, informal groups, there's temporary ad hoc groups, and then of course there's permanent ones. Most of the time you're going to be on formalized permanent teams or groups, and so most of us refer to that as a job or you have some kind of formal authority command structure built into it. But really when it comes down to it, that's the norm. If you want to think about like informal permanent groups, those would be like your personal relationships, especially with your friends. Your friends probably don't get together and select committees amongst your friends to decide who gets to decide where we're going out for dinner, how much we're going to spend, someone has a budget. So that the lack of all those things makes things informal. All right, and then like temporary ones. So like a formalized temporary thing would be like a task force on a project that you're working on through the job. Like all your group projects at school, those would be formalized temporary teams or groups. And then like your informal ones, that would be like if you joined a book club so, or something like that. It's not something that it really has much bearing on the working world, but that's a good way to actually think about it. And so if you can think about like the difference between formal and informal, most of the time you're going to be dealing with formal. And then at the same point in time, you're also going to be dealing with long-term groups as opposed to short-term temporary ad hoc committees. That's going to, it should point you to which are the things that require a little bit more engineering. Okay, anything that's formal requires more engineering than anything that's informal, and anything that is long-term requires more engineering or planning on your part as a manager rather than something that is informal, or temporary. And so most of the time when we're talking about work, we're talking about formal, long-term, and so yes, you need to do kind of the heavy lifting as the manager when you're doing the planning up front. Now, here's the rub. Now, most of the time, especially right after you're done with your MBA, if you're not working in industry already, and by the way, some of you are pinging me on LinkedIn. Thank you. So yeah, absolutely keep in touch with me. So we don't have that much class time left, and so if you're not on there yet, do so. Because quite honestly, I've been finding some really good gigs out there lately, and I've been pushing them out to everybody. So that little side note there, but just keep that in mind. But most of the time when you start out and you're in your very first job, your first heavy duty job, you're going to have like very little to no say over what's actually going on. Okay, because they're going to plug you in, they're going to train you up, they're going to, sometimes they'll assign you a mentor, so, whatever. All right, but in all those situations, you're not going to be doing much of the planning piece. But I will tell you that the planning piece is the most important piece, because the next thing that we want to talk about is the group dynamic model. So this is the group development model. You'll also see this referred to as the team process model. And it comes in a couple different flavors, but they all pretty much say the same thing. So first of all, if you can think about the different properties of the team, whether it's like informal or formal, long-term or short-term, and then you start thinking about like the process that all teams go through. This, is the piece right here that virtually everybody in OB agrees on. All right, and so every team that you're a part of, everyone that you have been a part of, every class that you've attended, all of them have gone through this process. And now that hopefully you've seen this before, maybe in undergrad, but if you haven't seen it before, maybe you're coming from a different degree field or something like that, understanding this process should open up a lot of eyes. Not eyes, but it should. Things should come together for you a little bit in terms of like understanding, that's what was going on. That's why that was a problem. Yes. And so the group development model has stages. All right. Each one of these stages here represents, they're sequential. And so you actually, go through each one of these, even though you may not experience all of them as a team. And so I like to illustrate this one as a class. So when you decided to come to this class, all you did was register. Well, first you did the prereqs and things like that, and you got hooked into the MBA program or 3-2 program or something like that. So that's all the stuff that you did on your end. Okay, but actually participating in the class, when the very first day you show up, I've already done this entire step right here for me, and you will too as a manager. All right, so when you actually do, maybe you're a year or two down the road and you're not working on just not screwing up and not losing your job and things like that, but you're actually, launching projects and you're put in charge of new things, you're going to have to go through this process as well. And this forming stage is the beginning, is the it's before you invite anybody to dinner. Okay, it's when you okay, I want to have a dinner party. This is how many people that I want to bring, and this is what I'm going to make, and this is when it's going to be, and what time, and things like that. All those decisions, those are managerial decisions. And so, like, before you even step into the class, I mean, the school has decided, okay, Pat's going to teach it. But even before that, I've actually sat down and I've thought about, like, okay, these are the things that I want to cover. This is how I want to do it. These are the expectations that I'm going to lay out there. This is the delivery format that I'm going to try and maintain. COVID notwithstanding. So, but really when it comes down to it, all that formation piece, that all happens before anybody actually joins the team. Because this forming piece is really the most important piece for you to concentrate on as a manager, especially if it's one of those formalized permanent groups or long-term groups. Because once you start inviting people to the table and they start actually joining the team, so you've picked who you want, things like that, and you're having your first meeting, you're going to go through the storming phase, okay? And so I want you to think about it like this. As a manager, even if you're in charge of all the planning and if you take on the responsibility of the team in the long run, the minute somebody else joins it is now ours, all right? And if it's our team now, then other people have a say in it. No matter how strict you want them to follow your plan, they won't. Okay, and so you do need to have this element where it's kind of like, all right, now there's other people at my dinner party, and people will duke it out a little bit on this one. I would say where you have a team that has more than 3 people on, them are going to fight, all right, every single time. And it might be like a little bit different than what you expect. Sometimes a fight means like, that's what I mean by fight. And other times it is actually like, no, who's in charge around here? Well, Pat says he's in charge, but around here, so I'm going to actually, try and take over this team or something like that. I'm sure any of those of you who have been in team sports, you've seen this, okay? You've seen it, where people is like, oh, who's the next captain going to be, and stuff like that. When you put enough people on a team together, then everybody's going to try and order themselves in a certain way. Group projects are my favorite example of this. And so notice that there's no group. That's for a reason. But really, when it comes down to it, think about all the group projects that you've been in. Okay, so how many times do you spend the first 5-10 minutes just staring at each other and kind of like, hey, how are you? You have to do this crap. So what you're doing is you're going through this. Somebody will actually step up and say like, okay, I'll handle this. Kind of thing. And when you get to that point in time, that's somebody going through that. You're going through it as well, even if you're not participating in it. And so Wednesday was really look forward to every single time I do this game that we're playing, is because what you're doing is you're going through the storming phase right here. Better with that than others, okay? And that's true of everybody. Okay, some people do not handle ambiguity very well. And in other instances, people kind of wade right into it. And so I think we were able to see in some doing that and who wasn't. If you weren't doing that, that's absolutely recognize the role that you're playing. Because even if you're playing a role, okay, you might be making somebody else's job harder. You might be making, things possible or impossible in the long run. It just depends. That storming phase. And so you've experienced that a little bit. And I do enjoy watching people, because I think really when it comes down to it, people who can navigate through this a little bit faster, those are the ones who usually come out as being. So think about this in team projects that you've had. Okay, so there's like 3 or 4 of you in there, and 2 of you are kind of like looking at the corner for your watch or something, and someone else is just finally they're just like, all right, fine. What do you want to do? The person, think about that. They're taking control of that group at that point in time. And once you step up and you do that, you assume a different mantle. But that's all part of the storming. Everybody goes through this. You can get stuck in it. It's very easy to get stuck in it. It's one thing that I definitely want you to think about, whether or not you were doing this last Wednesday. On the team, in the beginning, you start focusing on the task immediately. Well, what the hell is it we're supposed to do? So if you were thinking about that, all right, and you spent the entire day as opposed to anything else, in a little bit of a problem, okay? Because this time, well, who's going to do what around here, and who's actually in charge, and what is it? Who's going to set the mission? Those different things. That's part of the storming phase. Happens every team, every single team. So like a lot of you are on a football team. Think about it. Every single year, you have a new team. Now it may have was last year, but you got to go through this during practice. Play your first game. It's like, okay, so who's actually going to step up around here? Who's kind of trailed off from last year? Do we have new people on coaching staff? Do we have have new requirements, blah, 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 all kinds of different things. But you're going through this process, even though you have a long-standing team. With a new season, you're going through this again, okay? And so the faster that you learn and immediately stop focusing on the task. So in the beginning of the season, championships, right? This isn't this Belichick's thing where you don't talk about the Super Bowl until you get to the Super Bowl. The task at hand. You really do need to focus on the team. How do we function together as a team? Who's doing what? Who's submissive? Things like that. That's not the right way to think about that, by the way. The way you hear things like that. But really, when it comes down to it, we all know that that kind of exists in all teams. So the sooner you go through this, the better, because eventually what happens is you get to this norming stage, and that's where whatever fights that were fought during that storming phase are settled. They're done. Okay, we're not going to open that wound again. We're not going to pick at that scab. We're not going to revisit that topic. However things are going here, this is how it's going to be. My guess is that some of your teams will get here on Wednesday, and some of you will not. Some of you will still be back in here. Okay, understand that I've already done this piece, so we're not going back to that one. But this one remains to be seen how fast some of you can work through that. And this one here, that one will be either this week or the following week, because you have to go through this norming phase, and that's where you bury the hatchets and you say, okay, this is the way it's going to be, and you do one of two things: either you lean in to the problem at that point in time, or you decide to disengage. All right, and some of you will do both in this exercise. And some of you will do some and then switch to the other. And that's fine. That's totally normal. I want you to think about that and observe that behavior as you're actually working with your groups here in the next couple of weeks on Wednesdays, okay? Because eventually you get to this performance stage, okay? So the performance stage is where the team is as good as it's going to get without major reductive surgery. So someone will have to leave, someone will have to be forced out, we'll have to have a leadership change, something like that, or the task itself will change underneath your feet, all right? If the task, imagine, you take a high-performing football team that's in week 12, all right? So they're on glide path to the Super Bowl, and boom, here's COVID, okay? That's an example of how you could actually affect a change. There's very few other ways you could do that unless your quarterback gets arrested or your coach dies of a heart attack while eating a cheeseburger, whatever. It's got to be one of those things in order to actually break people out of this performance stage in order to affect a change. Now, this is something that I want you to think about 4 or 5 years down the road. All right, you're going to go into a company, you're going to have a great shiny new job with a cool salary and all these, the spiffy things that come with management gigs, and you're going to get thrown into a company that's already in this stage. All right, and you're going to have all these great ideas and you're going to want to do all these different things. They're not going to listen to it, and the reason why they're not, it's about as good as it's going to get. Okay, I remember when I was working on the railroad instance where my mentor at the point in time told me specifically to stop tinkering things. It makes money as it is, so just leave it alone. It was a really important lesson. So, I had all these ideas about how we were actually going to run this operation a little bit more smoothly, and I saw really low-hanging fruit on how to change stuff. But he was like, no, just leave it alone. It makes money. So be prepared for that, all right? So especially if you're going into something that's a little bit more established, like finance, accounting, or if you're doing something a little bit more entrepreneurial, then don't settle for that mentality. But at the same point in time, understand that the reason why you're hitting that is not because they don't care about you. It might feel it's fundamentally it's performing well. Just play your role. Okay. The sooner you kind of accept that, the sooner you'll be able to recognize whether or not that's the kind of job you want, or if you answer that until you're actually faced with that situation. So. Either one's fine. You'll all hit this one probably next week or the week after. All right. So, and some of your teams will not make it here. So I hope they all do. But every time we've done this, there's always been one company that kind of never really got it together. If that turns out to be your company, I want you to just put on your analyst hat and start thinking about why is that? Why did that happen? Okay, because that is a useful experience to have now as opposed to later. That doesn't mean tank your team. Don't do that. And then finally, you get this last stage, which is a journey. Everybody eventually, all teams die. All teams break up. All companies go bankrupt eventually. Nobody wins all the Super Bowls, although some people certainly try. But really, everything adjourns. Just like this class. This class will adjourn in 7 weeks. Okay, and at that point in time, you all go your separate ways. But between now and then, you have the shared experience that hopefully it turns into something slightly unique. But at the same point in time, also recognize that no matter how well you perform as a team, eventually your team's done. You're going to be done with it. Same thing is true with your career. All right. So I remember years ago there was one of the advisors in my PhD program really actually gave me a really good piece of advice about designing classes. Okay. And a lot of the classes that I teach now are designed on some of her principles, but she told me one thing: it's yours. Okay, it's not yours. And that was a really important lesson, because it was kind of like, oh, actually, yeah, I might be headlining this class, but I'm not going to teach it forever. It's going to go to somebody else eventually. And so, I'm more of a caretaker at this point in time than I am necessarily the and so, and I know not all your professors see things that way, because mine certainly didn't. But at the same point in time, that's a good attitude to have as a manager as well. So you are there for the amount of time that you actually have. You're a caretaker. You're a steward in some ways. And unless it's your own business, you're right. It doesn't belong to you. That job doesn't belong to you. Those employees aren't yours. Really, when it comes down to it, you just put you in a position where you're actually going to be in charge of it for a little while. And so, like all things, you will adjourn at some point in time. So that's really important to understand. All right. So those 3 things. Number 1. Today, remember, all right, there's a difference between groups and teams. All right. Teams are things that need to function together. And the most important relationship in a team is the one that you have with your coworkers, okay? You could care less about your boss most of the time, unless the guy's a problem or unless he's a really good boss, all right? So, but really, you can put just about any boss in there, because when it comes down to it, it's the function between the 2 different players, the different employees, that is actually the most important relationship. So I did my job. How well I did my job affects how well you can do your job. That's a team. Okay, there's a lot of instances out there that work like that, but there's other instances where they say this is a team, but it's not a team. It's really a group. In a group, the most important relationship is the relationship that you have with whoever the authority is. So every class that you have, nobody should call them team projects. They should all be group projects, because the relationship you have with your classmates is not nearly as important as the relationship you have with your professor, right? That's where the points come from. Okay, we know where the bread is buttered here. Okay, so if you find situations out there in the wild, especially on the job, where people are calling you teams, but it's really a group, that's fine. Don't correct them. You just know better. But also understand the dynamic there, and the most important relationship is the one between employee and manager in a group, whereas in a team, it's between employee and employee. Depending on which situation you find yourself ending up in, you will have to change your management expectations, okay? So if it is a group situation where you're the most important person in the room, all right, and everybody's individual relationship with you is the most important, you need to know that and acknowledge that, and recognize the amount of power that you have in a situation like that, and treat it responsibly. All right. Well, we're gonna talk a lot about power in a couple weeks here. Okay. Likewise, if you're in a team situation, respect your employees. All right. Respect their ability to actually manage their own relationships around them, and understand that they will hold each other accountable if they actually believe in the team and what it's trying to do. Okay, and so that's the number 1 important thing today that's one of 3, all right? Number 2 is understand different team properties, okay? So understand that teams have different like objective, or different, the way to organize your thinking about those is by long-term and short-term versus formal and informal, okay? Most of the stuff that you're going to be working with on the job is going to be formal long-term, and so that requires a lot more planning, which means that you need to spend a lot more time doing this formation stage, okay? Especially if you're there for it. Now, if you're not there for it, you just got to kind of deal with what you got. But at the same point in time, the more work that you do up front here, the less time people are going to spend here, and the less time those wounds will take to heal in this step right here. And so the third most important thing that I want you to consider today is this entire team process. So if you under process, you'll be able to recognize where are we in this process and what does it take to get to the next one. And so that's the last piece. This formation stage, it's all on you, buddy. You better do the planning. If you're in the storming phase, give people their space, all right? Let them decide kind of what role they want to play, if you can. And at the same, even if you're in charge of the team, there are going to be other people who are vying for that number 2 spot or whose culture or whatever. All those different roles exist within teams. Give people some space to do that. All right. Don't force the issue trying to get people through this. Because if you come in here and 2 people are trying to like figure out, okay, who's going to be the number 2 around here, and you just come in and say, well, it's going to be you. All right, and just like problem solved. Well, the person who didn't get picked is not happy about that. All right, and why they should accept your decision, other than the fact that you're in charge, and that is a very, very narrow hat to hang your hook on. Okay, so but if you let them kind of duke this out a little bit and get them to the point in time where, okay, so there's a little bit of mutual respect here going on, maybe they'll come to a better third way in terms of an option on that. But you wouldn't let them do that if you don't give them space to do that. So make sure if you're in this phase, give your employees some space, but also understand there are going to be times where you have to step in and put your foot down. Okay, so now we're not hashing this one out again. That's perfectly fine. Just don't use that as your only tool in your toolbox, okay? So sometimes patience is just as good, all right? So don't fall in that trap where every problem looks like a nail, okay? Be careful with that, all right? And then if you get to this stage, with this one, with the norming stage, this is where people are supposed to heal. Let them heal, okay? Give them an opportunity to actually heal in their own ways. Sometimes that requires a little bit more patience than what you might be able to afford. But at the same point in time, just a little bit of positive reinforcement and feedback goes a long way in this one. People will get to where you want them to be. And then the last one's the easiest one. Once people get to this stage, leave them alone. Just let them do their thing, okay? So step in when you have to, but if you're stepping in all the time because that's what you had to do in order to get through these 2 stages, also understand that at certain points in time, your job as a manager is done, okay? And so if you can get through these other stages quickly, and if you did a lot of good work in the planning stage up front, this one, this is where you get to leave it. So keep that in mind, all right? So those are the really important things that I want to discuss in this chapter. All right, there is a lot of other good stuff in this one. So punctuated equilibrium theory. So this one dials back to change management. We'll talk about that at the end of the class. And so the different types of ways in which you can actually like measure a team or a group. So there's a thing called cohesion. There's a thing called flow. I'll let you check that out on your own. Watch out for this one, which is called groupthink. That's where people like just go along because they don't want to disagree. Try and avoid that if you can in your team in your teams here. And the same thing is true just because that one does become toxic over time. Because even if it's called groupthink, it's really in the person there who's kind of driving that. It's the person who either is forceful enough, but usually it's the ones to piss off. All right. So be very careful with that. And then watch out for this in particular. This is one of my favorite topics. We will spend some more time on this one in the future, but I want you to start thinking about your teams in particular. And those of you who have built very large teams, you need to watch out for this very carefully, because social loafing is where you can take cover because there's not enough work and there's too much team. So ask yourself in this organizational like exercise that we're doing, if you have people who are out of a job, what could you actually have them do? That should be an interesting problem. You do find yourself a little bit out of your job. The more important question, though, is not just what could you do, but will you? Okay, so that is something that no book can teach you. But I mean, are you actually going to do a little bit extra? Decide that, especially when there's no reward tied to it. So good luck with that. Because if you can learn how to manage that, there is very little else that I could even remotely hope to teach you. All right, so and hopefully some of you will have some pointers on that by the time we get to the end of our exercise here that will be running for a few more weeks. All right, and so yeah, that's just some of the stuff on group dynamics in here. There are other things in here that are pretty interesting that you should check out on your own. So management of teams and barriers to effective teams are particularly good ones. Understanding the characteristics of team design characteristics. This basically just walks you through the different properties. We already covered this, difference between groups and teams. So make sure you're designing to the right principle. But also at the same point in time, start thinking about like different types of tasks out there. All right. So some teams are better suited towards what we call um, production tasks versus idea generation tasks versus problem solving tasks. I would say that you have a little bit of all of those to work with in our simulation. And so sometimes certain people are better suited for individuals, but really when it comes for individual tasks, but really when it comes down to it, how mutually supportive are these? All right, so start thinking about that as well. Giving you a lot to think about today in a very short period of time. Team roles, we already kind of talked about that a little bit. But really understanding that different roles are like oftentimes not just isolated single roles. Meaning like if you're the CPA, that's not all that you do, okay? Or it's like the better way to put it is that is all that is required of you, but that's not all that you could do. All right, and so you're going to run into situations where maybe we can do a little bit of role enlargement, okay? Or at the same point in time, maybe we can do a little bit of cross training. Maybe we can actually set it up so that we're operating as a what is it? What's the saying? It's as tight as a Swiss watch. So if you're in that situation, is it time to stop, or is it time to actually refine that even a little bit more? Or if it works fine, maybe you should leave it alone. I don't know. These are all questions that you're going to have to face. But this chapter in particular starts talking into some of those things. And so I would encourage you, if you're struggling with it a little bit, definitely dive into this one. Now, this is one that's really important to understand, team leadership and autonomy. Now, we've already kind of done that. That's actually baked into the cake a little bit. So you do have leadership on each one of your teams. Okay, and the reason why that's in there is because I've put it on your own. Okay, but understand that people who come out of graduate school in particular don't fully grasp. Now, people in athletics do, okay, or people who transition from the military. But a lot of times when your experience is school, okay, or working, like a part-time job or something like that, and you've always been kind of down far on the totem pole for a while, of course, you don't really want to actually put yourself out there as a leader because you've probably had a lot of leaders in the past who beat you up for one thing or another. Experience is the wrong way, but also understand that team is vital. I don't think a team can function without that situation where it's like, well, who's in charge around here? It's like, oh, well, we just kind of decide. That does not work out there in the working world. And so with our simulation here, I have provided you with a little bit of leadership structure. Feel free to build upon it. Okay. The other thing that you want to consider is team size. We'll come back to this one in the future because I'm curious to see how some of the teams do. I've got a little bit of anticipation, so to see exactly how you guys handle this in some situations, because you do have some very large companies that I have not seen in the past, and so I'm quite curious to see what you can do with them. All right, but think about this, all right, in some respects too. And so those are a lot of the various team properties that they're talking about in this chapter. Those are things that you need to think about during these stages of group development, particularly this forming, storming, norming. So the formation piece is done. Now you're stuck in this one and maybe working your way towards this one. Think about where you are in the process and where you want to go, because now is the last chance. The next 2 weeks is about the last chances that you're going to have in order to change something. It's going to seem kind of fast and furious, but at the same point in time, you're doing the things that the book is talking about. And so hopefully this very short lecture that we've done today has kind of illustrated a few of those things for you. And, I try not to give advice, and I won't, okay? But I will tell you that if there's any one exercise in the class that informs my lectures, it's this one, okay? And so take that for what you will. All right. So like I said, short lecture today. We're a little bit over the half an hour mark. But again, if you joined us a little bit late, please post in the comments. Just drop me a hi, what's up, something like that. Or, tell me how much snow is in Pueblo. I don't know. Just post something so that I can see that you're there. And I will hook you up with a free mastery exercise. After the video today, if you post in there, just email me. Tell me which one you want. You can have any of them that you want. Any one of those ones that you haven't done. For like the last couple of modules that we have here, those are fine. Or if you missed one in the past, feel free to punch that one in too. I'll totally give you credit for it. But with that being said, we need to pull the pin on here, so the laptop is not doing so hot. And so I will stick around for a minute or two. But if you have any questions, but I really look forward to seeing you all in class on Wednesday. And remember, either be there in person. Actually, being on campus in person is kind of cool. And so my mom got her shot not too long ago, and I'm feeling a lot better about actually being on campus, because that was always my concern, that I'd bring it home. I feel a lot better about that, and now it's actually kind of cool to be back on campus. We'll only be doing it for a few more weeks, so if you want to come on by, come on by. Otherwise, we will throw up the Wonder link. All right, so just a couple minutes before class starts, and that thing is persistent state. So if you feel the need to actually get on there and talk to your teammates or anything like that, I guess most of you probably swap phones or something like that too. That's fine, but just understand that it is persistent state. It's up there all the time. Feel free to use it anytime. It's kind of a neat thing that we found for this class in particular. I hope it's working out for you, but like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit on Wednesday. And Wednesday we'll kick things off with City Council meeting, so I need my counselors to meet in city chambers. I'll be there with you, and anybody who else wants to join the meeting, just join the circle. So that you don't have to come to that if you don't want to. And just understand that, of course, City Council are the only individuals who get to vote, although you can feel free to voice your displeasure with their decisions at that time too. But we will do that pretty quick on Wednesday. And for those of you who are on City Council, I'll help you organize the meeting. And so I will see you there on Wednesday. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. So like I said, I'll stick around for a minute or two if you have any questions. Other than that, have a wonderful afternoon, and we will catch you all on Wednesday. You're off the hook. See you then. Bye. No snow in Pueblo. Okay, I'm going to do the comments now. So if the audio is intolerable, feel free to log off. It's totally fine. So, Katrina, is your audio messed up too? My video keeps lagging back. I'm sorry, man. So, my bad. Thanks for helping everybody out, Skylar. So, oh man. No snow in Pueblo, huh? All right. Well, I'm sorry about the quality, guys. So it was working pretty well earlier, but apparently not now. My bad. Well, shoot. All right. Well, we'll just kill it off then. We'll see you guys Wednesday. Take care now.